We're gonna be showing you a number of videos, all of them dealing with serious matters. The first one especially is quite graphic. But with that said, here we go.
Твою мать, это они бежали просто. Связанными руками.
Как патриот делать? Мы вообще зеленого потеряли.
So what you just saw there is a massacre, effectively, of civilians. The evidence of such alleged to have taken place in Ukraine in Bucha. And independent journalists who went there, this is just northwest of the capital, by the way, say that they found what you saw in that video. Streets littered with dead bodies, most wearing civilian clothing. Some had their hands tied behind their backs, apparently executed, including a number of people who had apparently been shot in the back of the head. Now, obviously, seeing even grainy, far away footage of that is very graphic, but the situation is very graphic. And sometimes we have to balance, not wanting to see something that's very difficult with making sure that people see things that are very real. And so that's what's going on right now. In Bucha, allegations of not only executions of civilians, but mass killings. Many were apparently found in a mass grave, more than 300 residents alleged to have been killed. And we have a little bit more footage. This is from the New York Times, where they spoke to some of the civilians that have been experiencing this sort of barbaric treatment.
Який працював в Зеленобуді, наводив порядок, мирна, чесна, розумна людина, дуже працьовита. І так просто ганебно, свідомо БМП переїхало його. Вийди, скажеш. Вийди, скажеш.
Ой, було дуже страшно. Один раз вийшла я із кімнати, і пуля попала, пробила вікно, і стекло, і в шкаф застряла. А другий раз осколок снаряда чуть в ногу не попав. А третій раз я йшла і не знала, що стоїть він з автоматом. І він вистрілив мимо мене. Я прийшла додому, я не могла, мене речі добрало.
So look, tragically, none of what was just described is wholly new, even to this specific conflict. People being run over in their cars, we've seen footage of that already. Civilians being randomly shot at, with no argument to be made that the soldiers thought they were fighting Ukrainian armed forces. That's not new either. The scale, though, might well be, Francesca. Hundreds of civilians being alleged to have killed as Russia left an area, seemingly as a message perhaps to others, maybe acting out in frustration. We're gonna get into a bit more video, but what do you make of this?
I mean, I think it's emblematic of the entire pointless exercise of this war and most wars, but this one in particular. What was the plan? Now that Russian troops are on their back heels, they're killing people indiscriminately. But even when they're winning, I'm reminded of Syria and the number of similar atrocities that we saw, simply to terrorize people. And as you saw, clearly it's having that effect. I mean, look, all war is terrible, but there are rules in war. And trying to gun down a grandmother is not one of them. None of those people are enemy combatants. And also, many of them had their hands tied, meaning they were already prisoners of war. Your goal is to take over a town, you've taken it over. They're your prisoners.
Yeah.
Oh, you can't hold them, so then you choose to massacre them.
Exactly.
I mean, it's just senseless and it's disgusting.
Exactly, and look, we're gonna very briefly pause to add the context that we have been. I think we can all agree regularly throughout this conflict that we should be against all killing of civilians, including when it's done by our own armed forces. It might not be in exactly this sort of situation. It does happen. It's awful in all conflicts. Right now, we're focusing, I think, understandably on this one. Now, we want to give you a little bit more information about this. Here is a bit of video of the mayor of Bucha, Anatoly Fedoruk, talking about what is alleged to have happened.
At the moment, there is half the city is destroyed. There is a lot of destroyed buildings, a lot of dead bodies on the streets, and the services are working on clearing mines, demining the streets, demining houses and apartments, and restoring the social infrastructure. We are also working on identifying the bodies of the people who were shot dead in our city. They were indiscriminately killed by the Russian occupiers. A lot of them are elderly people. We get the impression that the Russian occupiers have got the green light from Putin and Shoigu, the Russian defense minister, to have a safari in Ukraine, and they weren't able to take Kyiv, so they vented their frustration on Bucha and the surrounding areas.
Yeah, absolutely devastating. And the more details you read, the worse it gets. He talked about the demining there. So if you're familiar in military conflicts, sometimes people leave mines. And the awesome thing about mines is sometimes they will function for years, decades after they've been planted, causing civilian deaths indiscriminately off into the future. That's been the result of our own mining campaigns as a country. Might well be true here, but they're talking about like they mine apartments. So that when civilians try to go home, they might die as a result of that. But maybe even sicker, some of the bodies that you saw on the streets have been rigged with explosives. So that if like these are like doctors, ambulance, like regular people that would then go to try to clear away some of the devastating evidence of these mass killings, they then can be killed. And there is no argument to be made that this is against the military, because the military is not going to be principally involved in the cleanup of this sort of thing. So just absolutely disgusting all around. Thankfully, people are paying attention to it. I wish they did all the time in all conflicts, but this is absolutely devastating. So thank God people are going to see every detail of this and understand what's happening.
Absolutely, and I think that was really important that the mayor pointed out, look, this felt like and is an act of desperation. Putin couldn't take Kyiv. He thought he was going to be welcomed with open arms in Ukraine. I mean, that's the latest from the inner circles. It's just like, in what world? They ousted your boy in 2014 and you think Ukraine loves you? Like, get a grip, buddy. And then, of course, this is what happens when you lash out. And again, and I know we're gonna talk about it, but we've seen this coming, you know what I mean? It's just insane. Like, it's sad that in our very doom and gloom top 10 earlier this year, I said I thought that Russia would invade Ukraine. And it's like, yeah, because we've seen the trail of devastation. We saw what happened in Syria, right? And so now that it's come to Europe, it's like, is it any wonder? No.
Yeah, and definitely devastation. I mean, how many times have we covered over the last month the losing their military leadership, about the skyrocketing death tolls? I haven't seen any updated numbers in the last week or so. Is there reason to believe that the last week has been better for Russia than the previous ones? Maybe they're pulling out of a lot of areas. Maybe they felt those are areas they couldn't hold and that they were experiencing high casualties in. But just devastating. And the fear is that this is not a fundamental change in strategy. It doesn't signal that they're done with this thing, they're transitioning out, but perhaps that they are planning to regroup and then come back in. The fact that they did that draft, again, it's not that they don't do the draft each year, but they're trying to get a whole bunch more conscripts. They've used conscripts in this war already. There's some news earlier today about them trying to bring in like 60,000 more soldiers, potentially to be dispatched to this. We know historically few world leaders have cared over much about their losses in these sorts of conflicts. Russia, perhaps least of all, perfectly willing over the last century to throw a wave of bodies at a problem that those bodies didn't create. And so that's the fear. Right now, Russian officials, by the way, are denying that civilians were killed in Bucha. Not that like specifically there were like mass killings. They're denying that any civilians were killed. They call it a provocation, and that the scenes we've seen have been faked. The reason that that's a very insidious thing to say is it's not impossible. There is propaganda on all sides of wars. It is possible that even the footage we showed you could be shown to be inauthentic, but many separate independent journalists working for a number of different outlets have been in Bucha. They've seen it. It would have to be a false flag and an order of magnitude beyond what even Alex Jones generally dreams up to imply that none of this actually happened. But you will be hearing that in the near future, so just prep yourself.
I mean, it's the same thing we heard out of Syria. I'm sorry, like a little boy covered in dust, like watching in horror as his building in his neighborhood just was bombed by Russia from the air, and then Russia releases a photo of him looking fine. Like, oh my God, look, he's actually fine. Like, yeah, because that photo was from before. So they do it all the time. And it's insane to me thinking about, like, imagine you're a civilian in Ukraine right now, all the work you would go through to stage your own death and then put a real, like the work. Where would you even buy the materials? Are there stores open right now for false flag operations? Just like, it's so silly to me. I don't ever want to hear any of that stuff again. And obviously it comes out of the Kremlin.
Exactly, yeah, and as people say, if all of the things that are claimed to be false flags are false flags, there would be no like wannabe actors working as waiters. They'd all have work regularly. It doesn't mean that militaries don't lie and the governments don't lie. We know all too well that they do. But what I'm fairly sure is not that everything that is inconvenient for the other side turns out to be a false flag.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.